Hi everyone, it's Dr. Fox. Let's talk about the larynx and laryngoskeleton. In this video, we'll discuss the larynx, where it's located and how it relates to adjacent structures and its functions. We'll also go in detail into the specifics of the laryngoskeleton, looking at its constituent cartilages and their features. So let's begin with the larynx. The larynx, or colloquially the voice box, is the portion of the respiratory system which is responsible for phonation, or language sounds. So if you're listening to me, it's complements of my larynx as well as your ears and a very complex neural pathway. Now, the larynx sits inferior to the hyoid, and it's suspended by the thyrohyoid membrane. That thyrohyoid membrane takes its name not just from the hyoid, but also from the thyroid cartilage that it directly suspends. There's also a ligament which connects the trachea to the larynx, and the trachea is inferior to the larynx, called the cricotracheal ligament because the trachea is suspended from the cricoid cartilage of the larynx. Relationally, the larynx sits at about the level of C4 through C6. In fact, the inferior margin of the cricoid cartilage is at about the C6 vertebra. The larynx is comprised of various cartilages, and we call the sum total of those cartilages the laryngoskeleton. Now, these are all hyaline cartilage, and they can ossify as an individual ages, and they are invested by mucosa and membranes, and they are attached to one another in articulations that are controlled by intrinsic laryngeal muscles. But before we can understand any of that, we need to understand the basics of the laryngoskeleton. So there are several major cartilages and several minor cartilages. So these include the thyroid cartilage, and I can just outline this for you here. We can see this in a lateral profile view. That thyroid cartilage is incomplete posteriorly. So we could see it there, and we could see it there. That sits atop the cricoid cartilage, and those two cartilages comprise the bulk of the larynx. There's also an epiglottic cartilage, which we can see there, and we can see just the tip of it right there, as well as arytenoid cartilages. And then there are corniculate cartilages and cuneiform cartilages. So let's take a look at each of these in a little greater depth. And let's start with the thyroid cartilage. The thyroid cartilage consists of two laminae, that meet together along a midline. The superior aspect of where they meet forms a prominence known as the laryngeal prominence. This is also colloquially referred to as the Adam's apple. And there are two sets of horns. There is a superior horn. The superior horn aligns with the greater horn or cornua of the hyoid bone. And sometimes these can be quite close together. And then there is an inferior horn. That inferior horn forms an articulation with the cricoid cartilage. It's called the cricothyroid joint. We'll see how that functions in just a little bit. So the thyroid cartilage sits atop the cricoid cartilage and forms that cricothyroid joint. The cricoid cartilage is the thickest posteriorly, and it is the only laryngeal cartilage that completely encircles the airway. So 360 degrees. In fact, cricoid comes from krikios, which means a ring. Then we have the epiglottic cartilage. The epiglottic cartilage has a leaf to it. Some of these are membranes. And then a stem that comes down and articulates at the bottom with the cricoid cartilage. And then we have the arytenoids, are the most highly kinetic cartilages of the larynx. They look like inverted cones that sit atop the cricoid cartilage, like so. So we can see the arytenoid cartilages here and there. Now let me delete this so that we can take a closer look at this. These arytenoid cartilages anteriorly have vocal processes and laterally have muscular processes. Now the vocal processes are going to attach to vocal ligaments, which attach to the thyroid cartilage, like so. These are going to be the basis for the vocal folds, or the vocal cords, once they're covered over by mucosa. Now, because these are so dynamic, we can do a couple of things with them. So we can move them, so we could glide them together. We can move them farther apart from one another, and that can change the vocal ligaments, or we can rotate them like so. Spin them around on their axis. So in this case, these posterior muscles here, these are the posterior cricoarytenoid muscles. When they pull on the muscular processes like so, that is going to abduct the vocal folds so as to create a very patent airway. There are other means by which we can move these things. So there are lateral cricoarytenoid muscles, and then there are arytenoid muscles. These are just gliding the arytenoid cartilages near. And what this does is it adducts the vocal folds, and it makes that space smaller. So let's assess the knowledge. Which major laryngeal cartilage has numerous intrinsic muscle attachments but is not kinetic despite those muscular attachments? Is it the arytenoid cartilages? No, those are the most kinetic. Is it the cricoid cartilage? Actually, yes, and we'll see why when we get into the details of the attachments to the cricoid cartilage. It has things like the posterior cricoarytenoid, the lateral cricoarytenoid, all of those. Epiglottic, nope, it is kinetic. Thyroid, that is kinetic as well. So cricoid cartilage is the only akinetic cartilage of the larynx. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to talking to you in the next video.